You wake up one morning, open your laptop, and Windows 11 greets you with a full screen ad for Microsoft 365. Not a notification, not a suggestion tucked in a corner. A full screen takeover. You paid for this machine. You own this machine. And the operating system you trusted is renting your attention to the highest bidder. That moment, that specific moment of quiet disbelief, is what millions of people experienced in early 2024. And it planted a seed. That seed has a name. It is called Ubuntu 26.04 LTS. Microsoft Windows has been the dominant desktop operating system since the early 90s, 30 plus years of market dominance. And for most of that time, the deal was simple. You buy Windows, Windows runs your apps. Everyone is happy. A clean transaction, a product you paid for that worked the way a product should work. Then something shifted. It started subtly with Windows 10. The telemetry settings buried 6 menus deep. The OneDrive integration that opted you in by default. The Cortana assistant that could not be fully disabled for years. Each thing felt minor, annoying, but manageable. Power users learned the workarounds. The average person just clicked through and accepted the defaults. Windows 11 changed the calculus entirely. The system requirements excluded hundreds of millions of perfectly functional machines. TPM 2.0 became a household term that people learned against their will. Then came the ads in the start menu. Then came the Copilot button nobody asked for, eating a key off your keyboard. Then came the mandatory Microsoft account requirement on the Home Edition. And then, in what might be the most tone-deaf product decision in recent memory, Microsoft announced it was exploring showing advertisements directly inside the start menu, not in a free tier, in the operating system you already paid for. That is your villain, not an abstract corporation. A specific documented pattern of behavior where the customer stopped being the user and became the product. And who is the victim? You. Specifically, you if you bought a Windows machine in the last 5 years expecting it to be a tool that serves you, not a platform that monetizes you. You if you have a laptop that Windows 11 flagged as incompatible even though it runs perfectly fine. You if you spent the last year quietly tolerating pop-ups, forced restarts, and a start menu that increasingly resembles a billboard. You are not alone. By mid-2024, Google Trends data showed a sustained spike in searches for switching from Windows to Linux that had not been seen since the Windows 8 era. Reddit communities like r/Linux and r/Linux4Noobs were growing at rates that surprised even longtime members. Something was building, a pressure that needed an outlet. Enter Ubuntu. Canonical, the company behind Ubuntu, has been releasing long-term support versions every 2 years since 2006. These are the serious releases, the ones that get 5 years of official security updates and, with the Ubuntu Pro subscription, up to 12 years of coverage. LTS stands for long-term support, and it is the version that enterprises trust, developers rely on, and now, increasingly, regular people are considering for the first time. Ubuntu 26.04 is scheduled for release in April 2026, continuing that yearly LTS tradition. And here's where the story gets genuinely interesting, because 26.04 is not just another incremental release. It represents the convergence of several years of quiet work that, taken together, make a compelling argument that the timing has never been better to make the switch. Here's the part nobody talks about. The mainstream Linux narrative has always been that it is almost ready for regular people. Almost. Journalists have been writing that sentence for 15 years. And critics of Linux have used that gap between almost and actually to dismiss the platform entirely. What those critics missed is that the gap closed gradually, then all at once. Gaming on Linux, once a genuine deal-breaker, has been transformed by Valve's Proton compatibility layer. Proton allows you to run Windows games on Linux without doing anything complicated. You install Steam, enable Proton in the settings, and your library works. Not perfectly. Not every title. But a staggering percentage of popular games now run at performance levels indistinguishable from Windows. Valve's own data from the Steam Deck, which runs a Linux-based operating system called SteamOS, showed that thousands of titles have been rated as verified or playable. That data point alone dismantled one of the most persistent arguments against Linux for everyday users. The Ubuntu desktop itself has matured considerably. Ubuntu 26.04 ships with GNOME as its default desktop environment, and the version included in this release brings refinements that make the experience feel genuinely polished. The activities overview, the application launcher, and the notification system, these are not clunky approximations of a Windows interface. They are a coherent design language that, once you spend a few days with it, starts to feel natural and even elegant. The Ubuntu Software Center has seen meaningful improvements too, and the practical effect for new users is that installing applications is increasingly a point-and-click experience that does not require touching the terminal. Now, here's the complication, because this story would not be honest without it. Snap packages, Canonical's preferred application distribution format, have generated genuine controversy. Snap apps can take longer to launch than traditionally installed applications. The Snap Store is controlled entirely by Canonical, which conflicts philosophically with the open source principle that no single company should act as a gatekeeper. Some community members have moved to alternatives like Pop! OS from System 76 or Linux Mint, which have actually blocked Snap from its official repositories in protest. For the average person switching from Windows, the practical impact is modest. Launch time gaps are measured in seconds, not minutes, and the Snap Store contains the major applications people actually use. But if software freedom matters to you philosophically, it is worth knowing the debate exists. The other honest complication is Adobe. Creative Cloud applications, Photoshop, Premiere, and Illustrator do not have native Linux versions. There are real alternatives: GIMP for image editing, DaVinci Resolve, which has an official Linux version for video work, and Inkscape for vector graphics. But alternatives are not the same as the tools you already know. Microsoft Office follows the same pattern. LibreOffice handles most document formats well, and Google Docs covers the collaboration piece entirely. But if your job requires native Excel with complex macros, you need to test your specific documents before committing to a switch. The gap has narrowed. It has not disappeared. So what has actually happened as a result of all this pressure and all this progress? Steam's hardware survey showed Linux reaching approximately 4% of the Steam user base in late 2024 and early 2025. 4% sounds small until you realize it represents tens of millions of individual users and consistent growth over several years. That is not a rounding error. That is a constituency. And it is not just gamers. Developers have been migrating to Linux-based environments at a steady clip, with the Stack Overflow Developer Survey consistently showing Linux gaining ground as a primary operating system among professional programmers. The tools, the workflows, the community support, all of it has matured to a point where Linux is no longer a curiosity for professionals. It is a legitimate first choice. On the enterprise side, Canonical reported significant growth in Ubuntu Pro subscriptions, and a new wave of European public sector organizations, spurred partly by concerns about American software vendor lock-in, has been quietly evaluating Linux alternatives with more seriousness than at any point in the last decade. France, Germany, and several Scandinavian governments have either piloted or actively deployed Linux-based desktops across public sector departments. That is not ideology. That is institutions making calculated decisions about sovereignty, security, and long-term cost. And here is why all of this matters right now, urgently on a specific timeline. Windows 10 reaches the end of support in October 2025. After that date, Microsoft stops releasing security patches. The installed base of Windows 10 machines is enormous, hundreds of millions of PCs. Many of those machines are perfectly functional computers that cannot run Windows 11 because they do not meet the TPM 2.0 and processor requirements. Microsoft's proposed solution is for you to buy a new computer or pay for extended security updates on an annual basis. Those are your options from Microsoft's perspective. And tucked inside that choice is something worth naming directly. A company that built its dominance on the promise of owning your software is now nudging you toward renting it, on a schedule it controls, at a price it sets. Ubuntu 26.04 LTS is the third option. It lets you take your existing hardware, install an operating system that will receive security updates for the next 5 years for free, and continue using your machine productively. It treats your hardware as an asset rather than a liability that has exceeded its subscription window. This is not hypothetical. This is a documented, dated calendar event arriving on schedule. The question is not whether Windows 10 support ends. The question is what you do about it. So here is what you can actually do right now with the knowledge you have from watching this video. First, go to Ubuntu's official website and download the latest LTS release. Before you install anything on your main machine, create a bootable USB drive and boot Ubuntu in live mode. This runs the entire operating system from the USB drive without touching your hard drive. Use it for a few hours. Browse the web. Open some documents. Get a feel for whether the interface works for you. This costs you nothing except a USB drive and an afternoon. Second, make a list of the specific applications you use daily and check whether they have Linux versions or viable alternatives. Be specific, not general. Slack has a native Linux version. Spotify does too. Zoom is covered. The gap between what works on Linux and what does not has narrowed considerably, but your personal list is what matters, not the average. Third, if you game, check your Steam library against ProtonDB. It is a community database where users report their experience running specific games through Proton on Linux. For the most popular titles, you will be surprised by how green that list is. Fourth, plan your transition in parallel rather than all at once. Tools like Ventoy let you set up a multi-boot environment where you keep Windows on one partition and Ubuntu on another. Use Ubuntu for a month for everything that works. Identify the gaps. Decide whether those gaps are deal breakers or manageable. Make the final decision from evidence, not anxiety. Fifth, engage with the community before you need help rather than after you are stuck. The Ubuntu forums, the r/Ubuntu subreddit, and Ask Ubuntu on Stack Exchange are filled with people who have already navigated the exact transitions you are considering. Ask your questions before you feel desperate and you will get better answers. Here's the big picture thought I want to leave you with. Every few years in the technology industry, a window opens. It does not stay open forever. It is a period where the incumbent has overreached, the alternative has matured, and the friction of switching has dropped to a level that makes the jump genuinely feasible for a meaningful number of people. We are in one of those windows right now. The specific combination of Windows 10 end of life, Windows 11's hardware requirements, Microsoft's increasing monetization of a paid product, and Ubuntu's genuine maturation as a desktop platform has created a moment that the Linux community has been anticipating for years without ever quite being able to claim had arrived. It has arrived. Not for everyone, not without trade-offs, but for a larger percentage of users than at any previous moment. Ubuntu 26.04 LTS represents a credible, stable, genuinely functional alternative to an operating system that has decided your attention is part of the product it sells. Think about what that actually means at a cultural level. For 3 decades, the personal computer has been synonymous with Windows. It shaped how entire generations learned to think about software, about file systems, about what a desktop even looks like. Choosing something different was not just a technical decision. It felt like a social one, like showing up to the office with the wrong laptop brand. That stigma kept millions of capable, curious people from ever seriously exploring what else was out there. Ubuntu has been chipping away at that stigma release by release, year by year, until the question stopped being whether Linux could work for regular people and started being whether regular people were ready to find out. And here's what I think is genuinely exciting about this moment. The people making the switch right now are not just solving a software problem. They are making a statement about what kind of relationship they want with their technology. They are voting with their time and their attention for tools that serve them rather than surveil them. You bought a computer to do your work. You deserve an operating system that agrees with you about that. And for the first time in a long time, a genuinely great one is ready and waiting. If this video gave you something to think about, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who are quietly having the same frustration you might be feeling right now. Drop your specific Windows pain point in the comments because I read them, and they shape what I cover next. And if you want to follow this story as Ubuntu 26.04 gets closer to release and the Windows 10 deadline hits, subscribing is the only way to make sure you do not miss it. See you in the next one.